With no doctor in sight, the desperate husband stepped in and helped the nurses deliver his own twins. Hi, my most treasured and deeply loved family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Thanks to each one of you, our family has grown to 24,000 strong, 24,000 hearts beating as one. This milestone is not just a number, it's a symbol of your unwavering love, your faith, and the beautiful bond we share. I am endlessly grateful to every single soul who makes this journey so special. Our next dream is bigger. We are reaching for 100,000, and I believe with all my heart that together we will get there. Every like, every comment, every moment you spend here brings us closer to that future. I've also noticed many new faces joining us in the last 7 days, and I want to know, where are you watching from? Which part of this beautiful world do you call home? Share with me in the comments. Let's celebrate the diversity and unity that make this family so unique. If you are still with me, if this bond still holds your heart, please don't hesitate. Write it loud and proud. I am here. Your voice is my strength, your presence my greatest blessing. And here's a prayer from me to you with all the love I carry. May your days be filled with peace and your nights with comfort. May love surround you in every form, and may your path be brightened by hope and kindness. May your home be a sanctuary, and your heart forever full. And may you always know how deeply you are valued, respected, and loved. You are the reason this story lives on, and I'm honored to walk this path with you. So, say it with me, I am here. The medical library was nearly empty at 2 a.m., save for the soft sobs coming from the corner study carrel. Ian Astley had been cramming for his cardiology exam when he heard her, a sound so broken it made his chest ache with sympathy. He followed the sound and found Amanda Jane hunched over her anatomy textbook, tears splashing onto diagrams of the human heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered when she noticed him, quickly wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't seem to understand how something so vital can be so complicated." Ian sat down beside her without invitation, his own textbooks forgotten. "The heart isn't meant to be understood," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper in the sacred silence of the library. "It's meant to be felt." She looked up at him then, and Ian felt something shift in his chest, a recognition, as if his soul had been waiting his entire life for this moment. Her eyes were the color of autumn leaves, warm brown with flecks of gold that seemed to dance. In the fluorescent light, even red-rimmed from crying, they were the most beautiful eyes he had ever seen. "I'm Amanda," she said, her voice still thick with unshed tears. "Ian," he replied, and something about the way their names sounded together in the quiet space felt like destiny. They spent the next 4 hours together, Ian patiently explaining the intricacies of cardiac anatomy, while Amanda listened with an intensity that made his heart race. But it wasn't just the studying that kept them there until dawn. It was the way she laughed at his terrible medical jokes, soft and musical. It was the way she unconsciously leaned closer when she was concentrating, her hair falling like a curtain between them and the rest of the world. It was the way she looked at him with such trust, as if she believed he could explain not just the mysteries of the human body, but the mysteries of the universe itself. When the first rays of sunlight began streaming through the library windows, Amanda finally closed her textbook with a sigh of satisfaction. "I think I understand it now," she said, smiling for the first time that night, a smile that lit up her entire face and made Ian's breath catch. "The cardiovascular system?" he asked, though his mind was far from textbooks and exams. "No," she said, her cheeks flushing pink. "How something so complicated can feel so simple." That was the beginning of everything. Their courtship unfolded, like a gentle symphony, each movement more beautiful than the last. Ian found himself looking forward to their study sessions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the way Amanda's presence made the world feel more vivid, more meaningful. She had a way of listening that made him feel like the most interesting person alive. And when she spoke about her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, about her love for old movies and rainy afternoons, Ian hung on every word as if she were reciting poetry. Their first official date was to a small cafe near campus where they talked for hours over coffee that grew cold as they lost themselves in conversation. Ian learned that Amanda grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, that she'd chosen nursing because she believed in the healing power of gentle hands and kind words. She learned that Ian came from a family of doctors, that he'd chosen medicine not for prestige, but because he wanted to save lives, to be someone's miracle when they needed it most. "You have healer's hands," Amanda told him that night as they walked slowly back to her dormitory, neither wanting the evening to end. She took his hand in hers, tracing the lines of his palm with her fingertip. "Strong, but gentle. I can tell." Ian felt electricity shoot up his arm at her touch, but more than that, he felt seen in a way he'd never experienced before. When he kissed her goodnight, a soft, tentative brush of lips that lasted only seconds but felt like forever, he knew with absolute certainty that he would love this woman for the rest of his life. The years that followed were a whirlwind of shared dreams and stolen moments between classes and clinical rotations. They studied together, supported each other through the grueling demands of medical school, celebrated each other's victories, and consoled each other through defeats. Ian fell more in love with Amanda every day, with her compassion for her patients, with the way she made everyone around her feel valued and understood, with the quiet strength that carried her through the hardest days. By their final year, they were inseparable. Ian's classmates joked that they were like two halves of the same person, but Ian knew it was deeper than that. Amanda didn't complete him. She made him want to be the best version of himself. She challenged him, inspired him, loved him with a fierce tenderness that took his breath away. The proposal came on a night when Amanda was sick with the flu, curled up in her apartment with tissues scattered around her like fallen snow. Ian showed up with soup and medicine, and when she protested that she looked terrible, he knelt beside her bed and pulled out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "You're beautiful when you're healthy, and you're beautiful when you're sick," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You're beautiful when you're happy and when you're sad, when you're confident and when you're scared. You're beautiful because you're you, Amanda Jane, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving every part of you." Through her fever and congestion, Amanda said yes with tears streaming down her face. Their wedding was small and perfect, held in the campus chapel where they'd spent so many quiet moments together. Amanda walked down the aisle in her grandmother's wedding dress, simple white lace that made her glow like an angel. When Ian saw her, he couldn't stop the tears that flowed down his cheeks. She was so beautiful, so radiant, so completely and utterly his. They wrote their own vows, promises that came from the deepest places in their hearts. Ian promised to love her through sickness and health, through triumph and struggle, through all the seasons of their lives together. Amanda promised to stand by his side, to believe in their dreams, to choose him every day for the rest of their days. "I love you," Ian whispered as they were pronounced husband and wife, "with every breath, every heartbeat, every fiber of my being." "And I love you," Amanda whispered back, "beyond words, beyond time, beyond anything I ever thought possible." Their first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, and as they swayed together in the soft light of the reception hall, Ian felt like the luckiest man alive. He had found his person, his partner, his forever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. That night, in their modest honeymoon suite, as Amanda fell asleep in his arms, with her wedding ring catching the moonlight, Ian made a silent promise to the universe. He would protect this love, this woman, this life they were building together. Nothing and no one would ever come between them. He had no way of knowing how severely that promise would be tested in the years to come. But in that moment, with Amanda's gentle breathing against his chest and her hand resting over his heart, Ian Astley believed that love could conquer anything. And perhaps, in the end, he was right. Chapter 2. The Weight of Unspoken Dreams. 2. Years into their marriage, Amanda Jane Astley had developed a ritual that Ian didn't know about. Every month, on the day her period was due, she would wake up early and tiptoe to the bathroom with a pregnancy test hidden in her robe pocket. She would sit on the cold tile floor, watching the little window with hope that grew more desperate each passing month, whispering prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. The tests always showed the same cruel result. 1 pink line, never 2, never the miracle she craved with every fibre of her being. On this particular morning in October, Amanda stared at yet another negative test, her hands trembling as she held the plastic stick. 2 years of trying, 2 years of carefully timed intimacy and fertility vitamins and ovulation charts that had turned their bedroom into something clinical rather than romantic. 2 years of watching her friends announce pregnancies with glowing smiles, while she smiled back and died a little inside each time. She didn't hear Ian's footsteps in the hallway, didn't realize he was looking for her, until she heard his sharp intake of breath. When she looked up, he was standing in the doorway in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in the way it always did when he'd been sleeping deeply. His eyes took in the scene. Amanda on the bathroom floor, surrounded by the debris of her monthly. Heartbreak, the test, the box it came from, the crumpled tissue she'd been using to wipe her tears. "Oh, sweetheart," Ian whispered, and the tenderness in his voice broke something inside her that had been barely holding together. Amanda sobbed. Then great heaving cries that came from the deepest place of loss she'd ever known. Ian was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms on that cold bathroom floor, cradling her against his chest while she fell apart completely. "I'm broken," she whispered against his shirt, the words muffled but clear enough to make Ian's heart shatter. "There's something wrong with me, Ian. I can't give you what you want most." "Hey, look at me," Ian said, gently tilting her chin up so their eyes met. His own eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are not broken. Do you hear me? You are perfect exactly as you are. We are perfect exactly as we are." "But you want children," Amanda said, her voice small and defeated. "You've always wanted children, and I can't." "I want you," Ian interrupted, his voice fierce with conviction. "I want you, Amanda. Children would be a gift, but they're not what makes our marriage complete. You are what makes my life complete." They held each other on that bathroom floor, until the sun came up, Ian stroking Amanda's hair and whispering reassurances, while she cried out 3 years of accumulated grief. When they finally stood up, legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor, Ian helped her wash her face and then held her hands in both of his. "We'll figure this out together," he promised. "Whatever it takes, whatever we need to do. But I need you. To know something, Amanda Jane Astley, I love you exactly as you are right now in this moment. That will never change." Amanda nodded, wanting desperately to believe him, but something had shifted inside her that morning. A confidence had been shaken. A certainty about her own worth had been damaged. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a slow erosion that would nearly destroy her before it was over. That evening, they had dinner at Ian's parents' house, something they did every month out of duty rather than pleasure. Richard and Margaret Astley, lived in an imposing Victorian home that had been in the family for generations, filled with formal furniture and family portraits that seemed to judge everyone who entered. Ian had grown up in this house, but he'd never felt comfortable there. Too cold, too proper, too concerned with appearances and legacy. Margaret Astley was a woman who measured success by traditional standards: marriage, children, social standing, and the continuation of family lines. She'd married Richard straight, out of college, produced 3 children in quick succession, and spent the next 30 years orchestrating their lives like a conductor directing a symphony. Her youngest son's happiness mattered less to her than his productivity in terms of family expansion. "Amanda, dear," Margaret said during dessert, her voice carrying that particular tone of false sweetness that always made Amanda's stomach clench. "I was talking to Jennifer Morrison today. You remember Jennifer, don't you? She was in Ian's class in high school. Well, she just had her 3rd baby, a beautiful little boy to go with her 2 girls." Amanda felt Ian's hand find hers under the table, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture of support and solidarity. "That's wonderful for Jennifer," Amanda replied carefully, proud that her voice remained steady. "Yes, it is," Margaret continued, cutting her apple pie with surgical precision. "She and David started trying right after their wedding and boom, pregnant within 2 months. Some women just have that gift, I suppose. The ability to create. Life comes so naturally to them. The words hung in the air like poison gas, seemingly innocent, but carrying a payload of cruelty that hit Amanda directly in her most vulnerable place. Ian's grip on her hand tightened, and she could feel the tension, radiating from him like heat. "Some couples prefer to wait," Ian said, his voice carefully controlled, but with an edge that anyone who knew him well would recognize as a warning. "They want to establish their careers, travel, enjoy being married before adding children to the mix." "Oh, certainly," Margaret agreed, but her eyes remained fixed on Amanda with a calculating look. Though at Amanda's age, waiting too long can become problematic. A woman's fertility begins to decline significantly after 25, you know, and Amanda must be, 28 now? 27, Amanda corrected quietly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Still," Margaret said with a dismissive wave of her hand, "the clock does tick rather loudly, doesn't it? Especially when there are family expectations to consider. The Astley name has been carried forward for 7 generations. It would be such a shame to see that legacy end." Richard, who had been silent through most of the meal, nodded in agreement. "Your grandfather would roll over in his grave if he thought the family line might die out with you, son. He always said a man's greatest accomplishment isn't what he achieves in his career, but what he leaves behind in his children." Amanda felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, a pain that went deeper than disappointment and lodged itself somewhere near her heart. She looked around the table at these people who were supposed to be her family, who had welcomed her with smiles and congratulations at her wedding, but were now looking at her like she was failing at the most basic function of womanhood. "We should go," Ian said abruptly, standing up so quickly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Amanda has an early shift tomorrow." "Of course," Margaret said, rising gracefully and walking them to the door. As she hugged Amanda goodbye, she whispered just loudly enough for Amanda to hear, "You know, dear, there are fertility specialists these days who work absolute miracles. Perhaps it's time to consider getting some help." The ride home was silent, except for Amanda's quiet tears and the sound of Ian's jaw grinding as he fought to control his anger. When they reached their small apartment, Ian pulled Amanda into his arms before she could escape to cry alone. "She was wrong," he said fiercely. "Everything she said was wrong and cruel and completely out of line. You are not failing at anything. Amanda, you are not letting anyone down." "But what if she's right?" Amanda whispered. "What if there really is something wrong with me? What if I can't give you children? Your family has such expectations, such history." "My family," Ian interrupted, can go to hell with their expectations. I didn't marry you to be an incubator for future Astleys. I married you because I fell in love with your laugh, with your kindness, with the way you see beauty in everything around you. I married you because you make me want to be a better man, not because I wanted you to produce heirs for a family legacy I never asked for. That night, as they lay in bed holding each other, Amanda stared at the ceiling and wondered if love really was enough. Ian had said all the right things, had defended her beautifully, but she could feel something changing inside her, a doubt that was starting to grow, fed by months of negative pregnancy tests and watered by the cruel comments of people who were supposed to love and support her. She didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. Margaret Astley's words had planted seeds of insecurity that would grow into something much darker and more destructive. Amanda fell asleep that night with Ian's arms around her, but for the first time in their marriage, she felt truly alone. Outside their bedroom window, October rain began to fall, and Amanda couldn't help but think it sounded like tears. Chapter 3. Silent Prayers and Shattered Hope. Years 3 through 6 of their marriage became a blur of doctor's appointments, medical tests, and hope that died a little more each month. Amanda's bedside table had transformed into a pharmacy of fertility, vitamins, ovulation predictors, and temperature charts that tracked her cycle with scientific precision. What had once been spontaneous and passionate between them became scheduled and clinical, their love life dictated by optimal conception windows and hormone levels. The first fertility specialist was Dr. Helena Rodriguez, a kind woman with gentle hands and eyes that had seen too much heartbreak. She ran Amanda through a battery of tests that left her feeling exposed and broken down into component parts: tubes, ovaries, hormone levels, egg quality. Everything came back normal, which should have been reassuring but somehow felt worse. If nothing was wrong, why wasn't it working? Sometimes, Dr. Rodriguez said during one of their appointments, her voice soft with practiced compassion, fertility is simply a matter of timing and patience. You're both young and healthy. Keep trying and try not to stress about it. Stress can actually interfere with conception. Don't stress. Amanda wanted to laugh at the impossibility of that advice. How could she not stress when every month felt like a personal failure? How could she not stress when Ian's mother called weekly to ask about progress, and when well-meaning friends offered unsolicited advice about relaxation techniques and vacation plans that had supposedly worked for their cousin's neighbors? Sister? Ian tried his best to be supportive, accompanying her to every appointment and holding her hand through every test. But Amanda could see the strain wearing on him too. She watched him grow quieter after each negative pregnancy test, saw the way his shoulders slumped slightly when another month passed without success. He never blamed her, never made her feel guilty, but she could sense his disappointment even when he tried to hide it behind reassuring smiles and gentle words. Maybe we should take a break from trying, Ian suggested one evening after Amanda had spent the day crying because her period had started again. They were sitting on their couch, Amanda curled against his side with a heating pad pressed to her cramping abdomen. A break? Amanda lifted her head to look at him, confusion and panic flashing across her face. But Dr. Rodriguez said, "I know what she said," Ian interrupted gently. "But look at us, sweetheart. Look at what this is doing to you, to us. You're miserable, and I hate seeing you in pain every single month." "I'm not miserable," Amanda protested, even though they both knew it was a lie. She was miserable. She was consumed by an aching emptiness that grew larger every month, a grief for children who didn't exist, but felt as real as the baby clothes she'd bought and hidden in the back of their closet. "When was the last time we made love just because we wanted to?" Ian asked softly. "When was the last time we talked about anything other than ovulation schedules and fertility treatments? I miss my wife, Amanda. I miss us." Amanda felt tears sting her eyes because she knew he was right. Their marriage had become centered entirely around her inability to conceive, their conversations reduced to medical terminology and cycle tracking. She missed them too. Missed the couple who used to stay up late talking about everything and nothing, who made love because they couldn't keep their hands off each other, who laughed until their stomachs hurt over inside jokes and silly movies. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared that if we stop trying, we'll never have children. I'm scared that you'll realize you married the wrong person." Ian turned her face toward his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Amanda Jane Astley, listen to me very carefully. I could never have married the wrong person because there is no right person for me other than you. Children or no children, you are my everything. You are my love, my life, my best friend, my soulmate. Nothing will ever change that." They did take a break, 3 months of trying to reclaim their relationship and remember who they were outside of their fertility struggles. It was good for them, those 3 months. They traveled to Vermont to see the fall foliage, went dancing like they used to when they were dating, made love without checking calendars or timing anything. Amanda felt more like herself than she had in years. But the break ended when they attended Ian's cousin Michael's wedding. Watching the young couple exchange vows, seeing the joy and hope in their faces, brought all of Amanda's longing rushing back. During the reception, when the bride tossed her bouquet and it landed in Amanda's hands, she felt like the universe was mocking her. She ran to the bathroom and sobbed into the flowers until Ian found her. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't pretend it doesn't matter." So they went back to trying, but with more aggressive treatments this time. Clomid to stimulate ovulation, progesterone supplements, intrauterine inseminations that left Amanda feeling like a science experiment. The side effects were brutal. Mood swings that made her feel like a stranger in her own body, bloating that made her clothes not fit, hot flashes that left her drenched in sweat at random moments. Ian watched his vibrant, beautiful wife slowly disappear, replaced by someone brittle and desperate, consumed by grief. She stopped laughing at his jokes, stopped wanting to go out with friends, stopped finding joy in the things that used to make her happy. Her smile became forced, her laughter hollow. She moved through their life like a ghost, present in body, but absent in spirit. The worst part was watching her after each failed treatment cycle. Amanda would lock herself in their bathroom and cry with a sound that didn't seem human, a keening wail of loss that cut through Ian's heart like a blade. He would sit outside the locked door, pressing his palms against the wood and whispering words of comfort that he knew couldn't reach her in the depth of her despair. "I'm broken," became Amanda's refrain, spoken in a voice so defeated it made Ian's chest ache. "There's something fundamentally wrong with me as a woman." "You are not broken," Ian would respond every time, but he could see that she didn't believe him anymore. The woman who had once been so confident, so sure of her place in the world, had been reduced to seeing herself only through the lens of her reproductive failures. The family dinners with Ian's parents became increasingly unbearable. Margaret Astley had stopped being subtle in her disappointment, making comments about modern women who wait too long and sharing stories about neighbors and friends who had solved their fertility problems through various means. She recommended specialists, diets, alternative treatments and fertility vacations with the kind of invasive persistence that made Amanda want to scream. "Perhaps," Margaret suggested during one particularly torturous dinner, "you should consider that God is trying to tell you something. Maybe motherhood simply isn't in your cards, Amanda. Maybe you should focus on other ways to find fulfillment." Ian's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down with barely controlled violence. "Mother, I'm going to say this once and only once. Amanda's fertility is not a topic of conversation for this family. Her worth as a woman and as my wife is not determined by her ability to have children. And if you ever speak to her like that again, we won't be coming back." Ian, his father warned, but Ian was already standing, helping Amanda up from her chair. "We're leaving," Ian announced, "and we won't be back until you can treat my wife with the respect she deserves." That night, Amanda cried herself to sleep in Ian's arms while he stared at the ceiling and felt helpless rage consume him. He was watching the woman he loved more than life itself slowly dying inside, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. All his medical training, all his knowledge about the human body, and he couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. By their 7th wedding anniversary, Amanda had become a shadow of the woman she used to be. She still went through the motions of their life, working her nursing shifts, maintaining their home, being affectionate with Ian. But something essential had been extinguished inside her. She existed in a state of functional depression, managing to appear normal on the surface while drowning in an ocean of grief beneath. Ian found her one evening sitting in the nursery they had hopefully prepared years earlier, surrounded by tiny clothes and stuffed animals that had never been used. She was holding a pair of yellow baby booties, tears streaming silently down her face. "We should get rid of all this," she said without looking up. "It's torture, keeping it here. These things will never be used." "Amanda," Ian started, but she cut him off. "I know what you're going to say. You're going to tell me not to give up hope, that miracles happen, that we just need to keep trying. But I'm tired, Ian. I'm so tired of hoping and being disappointed. I'm tired of being poked and prodded and medicated. I'm tired of feeling like a failure every month. I'm tired of being broken." Ian knelt beside her on the nursery floor, taking the tiny booties from her hands and setting them aside. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "You are not broken," he whispered into her hair. The words he had spoken 1,000 times before, but meant with every fibre of his being. "You are the strongest, most beautiful, most perfect woman I have ever known. And whatever happens, whatever the future holds, I will love you through all of it." But as Ian held his shattered wife in that empty nursery, surrounded by the remnants of dreams that might never come true, he wondered if love would really be enough to put her back together again. The woman he had married was disappearing a little more each day, and he didn't know how to save her from the darkness that was consuming her from the inside out. Outside, rain began to fall against the nursery windows, and Amanda closed her eyes and wished she could disappear into the sound of it. She was drowning in her own life, and she didn't know how to find her way back to the surface. Chapter 4. The First Cut. The baby shower invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, embossed with silver teddy bears and tied with a pale pink ribbon. Amanda stared at it for a long moment, her coffee growing cold in her hands, before setting it aside with the careful movements of someone handling broken glass. "Whose shower?" Ian asked, glancing over from where he was reading the newspaper at their small kitchen table. "Your cousin Sarah's," Amanda replied, her voice deliberately neutral. "The one who got married last summer." Ian winced slightly. Sarah was barely 23, had been married for 8 months, and was already 6 months pregnant with what everyone kept calling a honeymoon baby. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, that someone could achieve in 2 months what they had been trying to accomplish for 7 years. "We don't have to go," Ian said gently, reaching across the table to take Amanda's hand. "I can call and say we have other plans." "No," Amanda said, squaring her shoulders in the way she did when she was preparing to endure something painful. "She's family. We should go." Ian studied his wife's face, noting the way her jaw was set with determination, and how her eyes had already started to build walls against the hurt she knew was coming. Amanda had become an expert at bracing herself for emotional impact, and it broke his heart every time he saw her do it. The shower was held at Margaret Astley's house, because of course it was. Margaret loved any opportunity to showcase her family's prosperity and her own skills as a hostess. When Ian and Amanda arrived, the house was already filled with women cooing over tiny clothes and sharing birth stories that made Amanda's stomach clench with longing. "Amanda, darling." Margaret swept toward them with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "How lovely that you could make it. Sarah will be so pleased." Amanda pasted on her own smile, the one she had perfected for occasions like this. "Congratulations to Sarah. She looks radiant, doesn't she?" Margaret agreed, her voice carrying that particular tone of satisfaction that came from watching family expectations being fulfilled. Pregnancy suits her so well. Some women just seem to bloom when they're carrying a child. The barb was subtle but perfectly aimed, and Amanda felt it hit its mark with surgical precision. Ian's hand tightened on her back, a silent gesture of support that she appreciated even as she wondered how many more of these little cuts she could endure. The shower games were torture. Amanda endured guessing games about baby food flavors and measuring Sarah's belly with ribbon while forcing smiles at appropriate moments. She watched Sarah open gift after gift, tiny onesies and soft blankets, and all the things Amanda had secretly bought and hidden away over the years, hoping that someday she would have her own reason to unwrap them. During the gift opening, Sarah held up a particularly beautiful hand-knitted baby blanket in soft yellow wool. "Oh, this is gorgeous!" Sarah exclaimed. "Who made this?" "That would be Amanda," Margaret announced, her voice carrying across the room. "She's been knitting baby things for years. Such a shame they're all going to gifts instead of—" She let the sentence trail off with a meaningful look that made several women in the room shift uncomfortably. Amanda felt heat flood her cheeks as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to barely concealed pity. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the expensive upholstery of Margaret's antique sofa and cease to exist. "It's beautiful work," Sarah said quickly, clearly sensing the tension in the room. "Thank you so much, Amanda." "You're welcome," Amanda managed, her voice sounding strange and distant in her own ears. The real blow came during Cake and Punch when Amanda excused herself to use the restroom. She was washing her hands when Margaret's sister, Aunt Claire, entered the powder room behind her. Claire had always been the more direct of the Astley women, never one to coat her cruelty in politeness. "You know, Amanda," Claire said, positioning herself between Amanda and the door in a way that made escape impossible, "I've been thinking about you and Ian a lot lately." Amanda's hand stilled on the towel she was using. "Oh? It's just that you've been married for what, 7 years now? And still no children. That's quite unusual for a healthy young couple." Claire's eyes were sharp and calculating as she studied Amanda's face. "I can't help but wonder if you're being fair to Ian." "I'm sorry?" Amanda's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Well, it's just that Ian has always wanted children. Since he was a little boy, he talked about being a father. And here he is, 31 years old, watching all his friends and cousins start families while his own wife—" Claire gestured vaguely at Amanda's midsection. "I just think it's selfish, really." The word hit Amanda like a physical blow. Selfish, as if her inability to conceive was a choice, a deliberate withholding of something Ian deserved. "I don't understand," Amanda said, her voice shaking slightly. "Oh, come now," Claire continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "You're obviously not capable of giving Ian what he needs. A real woman would recognize that and step aside. Let him find someone who can actually fulfill her duties." As a wife, Amanda felt the room start to spin slightly, her vision blurring at the edges. "My duties? Producing heirs, of course. Continuing the family line. Ian could have any woman he wanted. He's handsome, successful, from a good family, but instead he's wasting his prime years on someone who clearly can't perform the most basic function of womanhood." Claire's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather rather than destroying someone's sense of self-worth. "If you truly loved him, you'd let him go. Stop being selfish and give him a chance at real happiness. The coffee cup that Amanda had been holding slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the powder room. The sound was sharp and final, like something breaking that could never be repaired. "Oh, look what you've done," Claire said with mock concern. "Always so clumsy, aren't you? Just like with everything else." Amanda dropped to her knees among the shards of broken porcelain, her hands shaking as she tried to gather the pieces. But her vision was blurred with tears now, and her movements were unsteady. A sharp edge sliced across her palm, drawing a line of bright red blood that dripped onto the pristine white marble. "Amanda!" The powder room door burst open as Ian rushed in, having heard the crash from the hallway where he'd been waiting for her. He took in the scene. His wife on her knees among broken china, blood on her hands, his aunt standing over her with an expression of cold satisfaction. "What happened?" Ian demanded, dropping to his knees beside Amanda and carefully taking her, bleeding hand in his. "Just a little accident," Claire said smoothly. "Amanda and I were having a chat and she got a bit overwhelmed." Ian's eyes moved from his aunt's face to his wife's, and Amanda could see the exact moment when he understood that this had been no accident. Amanda was shaking now, her whole body trembling with shock and humiliation. "What did you say to her?" Ian's voice was dangerously quiet as he helped Amanda to her feet, wrapping the cut on her hand with his handkerchief. "I simply shared some thoughts about marriage and responsibility," Claire replied, not backing down even in the face of Ian's obvious anger. Someone needed to have an honest conversation with her. "Get out," Ian said, his voice deadly calm. "Excuse me? Get out of this room. Get out of our lives. If you ever speak to my wife like that again, if you ever make her feel like less than the incredible woman she is, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Claire's face flushed with indignation. "How dare you speak to me like that? I'm your family." "No," Ian said, his arm tightening protectively around Amanda's shaking form. "She is my family. You are just someone who shares my DNA." They left the shower immediately, Ian practically carrying Amanda to their car as she struggled to hold back sobs until they were out of sight of the house. The moment they were alone in their vehicle, Amanda completely broke down, crying with the kind of despair that comes from having your deepest fears confirmed by someone else's words. "She's right." Amanda sobbed against Ian's chest as he held her in the front seat of their car. "I am selfish. I'm keeping you from having the life you want. You could be happy with someone else, someone who could give you children." "Stop!" Ian said fiercely, his own voice thick with emotion. "Stop saying that. Claire is a bitter, cruel woman who has no right to judge anyone. What she said to you is unforgivable. But what if she's right? What if I am being selfish by staying with you when I can't give you what you need?" Ian pulled back to look at Amanda's face, his hands gently framing her tear-stained cheeks. "Amanda Jane Astley, look at me. What I need is you. What I want is you. Children would be wonderful, but they are not more important than you. They are not worth losing you. Nothing is worth losing you. But your family, my family," Ian interrupted, his voice hard with anger, "can go to hell, every single one of them. If they can't see what an incredible, valuable, worthy person you are, then they don't deserve to be part of our lives." That night, Ian held Amanda while she cried herself to sleep, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. When she finally quieted, her breathing deep and even with exhaustion, Ian stared at the ceiling and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. For 7 years, he had tried to maintain relationships with his family while protecting Amanda from their cruelty. He had made excuses for their behavior, had tried to shield her from the worst of their comments, had believed that eventually they would come around and accept her as she was. But watching his aunt tear down the woman he loved, seeing Amanda's spirit break a little more, Ian realized that some lines once crossed could never be uncrossed. Some words, once spoken, revealed truths about people that couldn't be ignored. His family had chosen to see Amanda as a failure rather than a person. They had decided that her worth was tied to her reproductive capacity rather than her character, her kindness, her intelligence, her love. They had looked at the woman who made Ian's life complete and found her lacking. As Amanda slept fitfully beside him, occasionally whimpering in her dreams, Ian made a decision. He couldn't control his family's cruelty, but he could control their access to it. He couldn't make them love Amanda the way she deserved to be loved, but he could prevent them from hurting her further. The first cut had been made, deep and vicious, and precisely aimed. But Ian was determined that it would also be the last one his family would ever be allowed to inflict, even if it meant choosing between them and the woman he loved. For Ian Astley, it wasn't really a choice at all. Chapter 5. Wounds That Fester. The second incident came just 6 weeks after the baby shower on Father's Day weekend. Ian had hoped to avoid the family gathering entirely, but his grandfather was turning 90, and some occasions were considered too important to miss. Amanda had begged him to go without her, but Ian refused to leave her behind to deal with questions about her absence. "We'll stay for an hour," he promised, as they stood on his parents' front porch, Amanda's hand trembling in his. "Just long enough to wish Grandpa happy birthday, and then we'll leave." Amanda nodded, steeling herself for another afternoon of carefully navigating conversational landmines. She had barely slept since the baby shower, Claire's words echoing in her mind like a cruel mantra. Selfish. Can't perform the most basic, a function of womanhood. Let him find someone who can actually fulfill her duties. The party was in full swing when they arrived, the backyard filled with multiple generations of Astleys and their friends. Children ran around with cake-sticky fingers while their parents watched indulgently, and Amanda felt that familiar stab of longing mixed with pain as she observed the domestic bliss she seemed destined never to experience. Ian's grandfather, Albert Astley, was holding court in his wheelchair near the garden, regaling anyone who would listen with stories from his youth. At 90, he was still sharp as a tack, with steel-grey eyes that missed nothing and a tongue that could cut glass when he chose to use it. "Ian, my boy," Albert called out when he spotted them approaching. "Come here and bring that pretty wife of yours." Amanda forced a smile as they approached, Ian's hand warm and reassuring on the small of her back. Albert had always been polite to her, if somewhat distant, but she had learned not to trust the superficial kindness of Ian's family members. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," Ian said, leaning down to embrace the older man. 90 years young. 90 years of living, loving, and leaving a legacy," Albert corrected, with a meaningful look. "Speaking of which, when am I going to get some great-grandchildren to spoil? I'm not getting any younger, you know." The question hit Amanda like a physical blow, even though she should have expected it. Ian's jaw tightened beside her. "We're working on it, Grandpa," Ian said diplomatically, but Albert wasn't satisfied with diplomatic answers. "Working on it?" The old man's eyebrows rose. "Son, you've been married for 7 years. How much work does it take? Back in my day, couples didn't work on it. They just did it." Laughter rippled through the group of relatives who had gathered around to listen, and Amanda felt heat flood her cheeks. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the manicured lawn, and never have to face another conversation about her failures as a woman. "Times are different now," Ian said, his voice taking on an edge that those who knew him well would recognize as a warning. "Different," Albert scoffed. "A man needs sons to carry on his name, grandsons to teach his values to, great-grandsons to ensure his legacy endures. That's not different, that's fundamental. That's what separates a real marriage from just playing house." "Grandpa," Ian started, but Albert was on a roll now, his voice growing stronger and more commanding. I built this family from nothing, Albert continued, his eyes fixed on Amanda with an intensity that made her want to shrink away. Worked my fingers to the bone to give my children and grandchildren opportunities I never had. And for what? So the family name could die out because my grandson married a woman who can't. That's enough. Ian's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and cold and absolutely final. That's more than enough. Is it? Albert's eyes glittered with challenge. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've wasted the best years of your life on someone who can't fulfill the most basic expectation of marriage. A barren woman is a curse on any man's house, Ian. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can fix this mistake. The word barren hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Amanda felt something inside her chest simply stop working. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stand there and absorb the cruelty of being reduced to livestock that had failed to breed. "We're leaving," Ian said, his voice deadly quiet as he moved to Amanda's side. "And we won't be coming back. Running away won't change the truth, boy," Albert called after them as Ian guided Amanda toward the house. "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers. The kindest thing you could do is set her free to find someone more suited to her limitations." Amanda made it to their car before she started vomiting, her body rejecting not just Albert's words, but the entire situation. Ian held her hair back and rubbed her shoulders while she was sick on the pristine driveway of his childhood home, her sobs echoing off the expensive cars parked around them. "I'm sorry," she gasped between heaves. "I'm so sorry, Ian. He's right. Your grandfather is right. I am a curse on your house. He's a bitter old man who thinks women exist only to produce heirs," Ian said fiercely. "He's wrong about you, wrong about marriage, wrong about everything that matters." But Amanda had stopped listening. Albert's words had joined Claire's in the chorus of voices in her head, the ones that told her she was less than broken, failing at the most fundamental level of womanhood. The third incident came just 2 months later, and it was perhaps the most calculated and cruel of all. Ian's sister Elizabeth had called to invite them to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, claiming she wanted to clear the air after the birthday party disaster. Against Amanda's better judgment, Ian had convinced her to give Elizabeth a chance. They arrived at the restaurant to find Elizabeth already seated at a table for 4, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair gleaming under the soft lighting. But she wasn't alone. "Ian! Amanda!" Elizabeth stood to greet them with the kind of bright smile that immediately put Amanda on alert. "I hope you don't mind, but I brought along my friend Sarah Wellington. I thought it would be nice for us all to get acquainted." Sarah Wellington was everything Amanda was not, tall, willowy, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from good genes and expensive maintenance. She was also, as Elizabeth made sure to mention within the first 5 minutes, a recently divorced pediatric surgeon with 2 adorable children from her previous marriage. "Sarah is just getting back into the dating scene," Elizabeth said with false casualness as they settled into their seats. "She's been so focused on her career and raising her little ones that she hasn't had time for romance. But now that she's established herself professionally, she's ready to find the right man to settle down with again." Ian's face had gone stone cold as he realized what was happening. But Amanda felt something much worse, a creeping humiliation that started in her stomach and spread outward like poison. Elizabeth had orchestrated this dinner to show Ian what he could have instead of Amanda, a beautiful, successful woman who had already proven her fertility and who could give him the family he deserved. "Sarah has such interesting stories about her work," Elizabeth continued, clearly prepared to spend the entire evening highlighting Sarah's accomplishments. "Tell them about that surgery you performed last week, the one where you saved that little boy's life." Elizabeth, to her credit, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the dinner progressed and her agenda became obvious. Ian's father, Richard, remained silent, occasionally shooting disapproving glances at his daughter's obvious matchmaking attempt. But the damage was being done with surgical precision. Every story about Sarah's children, every mention of her successful career, every comment about her eligibility was another knife in Amanda's already wounded heart. "Elizabeth," Ian said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "what exactly is the point of this dinner?" "I just thought you should know what options are available to you," Elizabeth replied with feigned innocence. "Sarah is exactly the kind of woman who would be perfect for someone like you, accomplished, proven, ready to build a real family." "I already have a wife," Ian said coldly. "Do you?" Elizabeth's mask slipped slightly, revealing the cruelty beneath. "Because it seems to me like what you have is a roommate who can't give you children. That's not a wife, Ian. That's a burden." Amanda stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward, clattering against the floor of the restaurant. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except run. She heard Ian calling her name behind her, heard the scrape of his chair as he followed. But she didn't stop until she was outside in the cool night air, gasping for breath, like a drowning person who had finally reached the surface. "Amanda, wait!" Ian caught up to her on the sidewalk, his face flushed with anger and exertion. "Please, sweetheart, don't run from me." "She's right," Amanda whispered, her voice so broken it was barely audible. "Your sister is right. I am a burden. I'm keeping you from having the life you deserve, the family you want. Sarah is beautiful and successful, and she has children, Ian. She could give you everything I can't." "I don't want Sarah," Ian said desperately, reaching for Amanda's hands. "I don't want anyone else. I want you. I will always want you." "But why?" Amanda's voice cracked with anguish. "Why would you choose someone broken when you could have someone whole? Why would you settle for someone who can't give you children when there are women like Sarah who can?" Ian felt his heart shatter as he looked at his wife, really looked at her. The vibrant, confident woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone who had been so broken down by his family's cruelty that she couldn't see her own worth anymore. Amanda had been systematically destroyed, piece by piece, until she truly believed that her only value lay in her ability to produce children. "Because I don't love your uterus, Amanda," Ian said, his voice raw with emotion. "I love you. I love your laugh, your kindness, your strength, your intelligence, your compassion. I love the way you care for your patients, the way you worry about stray cats, the way you cry during sad movies. I love your terrible cooking and your beautiful singing voice and the way you scrunch up your nose when you're concentrating. I love 1,000 things about you that have nothing to do with whether or not you can have children." But Amanda was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "That's not enough, though, is it? Love isn't enough if I can't give you what you need." "You are what I need," Ian insisted, but he could see that his words weren't reaching her. The damage had been done, and Amanda was drowning in self-doubt and worthlessness. That night, Amanda lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling while Ian slept fitfully beside her. 3 incidents in 3 months, each one more devastating than the last. Each one had chipped away at her sense of self until she felt like a hollow shell of the woman she used to be. Selfish, barren, a burden. The words circled in her mind like vultures, feeding on what was left of her self-esteem. Ian's family had succeeded in their campaign to destroy her confidence, to make her believe that she was standing in the way of his happiness. As she watched Ian sleep, Amanda found herself wondering if they were right. Maybe the kindest thing she could do was let him go. Maybe love really wasn't enough when it came with so much pain and disappointment. Outside their bedroom window, storm clouds were gathering. and Amanda couldn't help but think that something was coming, something that would force them both to confront the question of whether their love was strong enough to survive the wreckage that Ian's family had made of their marriage. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but all she could hear was the sound of approaching thunder and the echo of cruel words that had taken root in her heart, like weeds, choking out everything else until only pain remained. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. The fourth incident came on their 7th wedding anniversary, a date that should have been sacred, protected from the outside world and its cruelties. Amanda had spent the morning preparing Ian's favorite dinner, attempting to recreate the meal they'd shared on their first date 7 years earlier. She wanted to give him something beautiful to remember, something that showed him how much she treasured their life together, even as she felt herself drowning in the undertow of her own perceived failures. Ian was at the hospital, covering an emergency surgery that had run longer than expected. He had called twice to apologize, promising to be home by 7 with flowers and champagne to celebrate properly. Amanda had assured him it was fine, that dinner could wait, that the most important thing was that they would be together. She was just pulling the roast from the oven, her face flushed from the heat and her hair escaping from its ponytail, when the doorbell rang. For a moment her heart lifted. Perhaps Ian had finished early and forgotten his keys in his rush to get home. But when she opened the door, she found Margaret Astley standing on her doorstep like an elegantly dressed harbinger of doom. "Margaret," Amanda said, her voice immediately guarded. "Ian isn't home yet. He's at the hospital." "I know exactly where my son is," Margaret replied, her tone crisp and businesslike. "I'm here to see you, Amanda. We need to have a conversation." Every instinct Amanda possessed screamed at her to close the door, to refuse this woman entry into the home she and Ian had built together. But years of training in politeness and deference to elders made her step aside, even as her stomach clenched with dread. Margaret entered their modest apartment with the kind of critical eye that catalogued every imperfection, every sign of their middle-class lifestyle that fell short of Astley standards. She settled herself on their second-hand sofa as if she were granting it the honor of her presence. "Please, sit down, Amanda," Margaret said, gesturing to the chair across from her as if she were the hostess in her own home. "What I have to say will be easier if you're seated." Amanda remained standing, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "What did you want to discuss?" Margaret's lips curved in what might have been called a smile, if it had contained any warmth whatsoever. "Your marriage to my son. I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do," Margaret interrupted, her voice taking on the tone of someone who had rehearsed this conversation many times. "You're not stupid, Amanda, whatever your other shortcomings might be. You know exactly why I'm here." Amanda felt her heart begin to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. "If you have something to say, please say it." "Very well." Margaret folded her hands in her lap and looked directly at Amanda with eyes as cold as winter steel. "It's been 7 years, Amanda. 7 years of marriage without a single pregnancy, not even a miscarriage to give us hope that you might eventually succeed. 7 years of watching my son waste his prime reproductive years on a woman who clearly cannot fulfill the most basic requirement of a wife." "That's not—" Amanda started, but Margaret held up a hand for silence. "Not finished. 7 years of making excuses for you at family gatherings, of watching my son's face grow more strained with each passing year, of seeing him sacrifice his dreams of fatherhood for your inability to conceive. 7 years of pretending that this arrangement is sustainable." Amanda's legs suddenly felt weak, but she refused to sit down, refused to give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. "Ian and I love each other. Our marriage is about more than just having children." "Love." Margaret spoke the word like it tasted bitter. How romantically naive. Love doesn't build legacies, Amanda. Love doesn't carry on family names or inherit fortunes. Love doesn't give a man the sons he needs to continue his bloodline. Ian doesn't care about bloodlines, Amanda said, but her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. Doesn't he? Margaret's eyebrows rose with mock surprise. Are you so sure about that? Because I've seen the way he looks at his friends' children, the way his face changes when he holds his cousin's babies. I've watched my son pretend that he doesn't want children, but I've also seen the truth in his eyes when he thinks no one is looking. The words hit Amanda like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at her deepest insecurities. She thought of all the times Ian had held other people's babies, the wistful expression she'd caught on his face when he thought she wasn't watching, the way he'd grown quieter over the years when surrounded by families with children. You've noticed it too, haven't you? Margaret continued, her voice softly venomous. The way he's changed, the way the light has dimmed in his eyes, the way he goes through the motions of happiness while his real dreams slip further and further away. Stop, Amanda whispered, but Margaret was relentless. You know what the cruelest part is? Ian is such a good man, so loyal, so honorable that he'll never leave you. He'll never admit that you've failed him because he loves you too much to hurt you. He'll sacrifice his own happiness, his own fulfillment, his own future for your feelings. And you'll let him do it, won't you? You'll let him waste his entire life on you because you're too selfish to let him go. That's not true, Amanda said. But the words came out as barely a whisper, isn't it? Margaret leaned forward, her eyes glittering with cold calculation. Tell me, Amanda, when was the last time Ian talked about the future? When was the last time he made plans that extended beyond the next year? When was the last time you saw him truly, genuinely happy? Amanda's mind raced, trying to remember, but she came up empty. When had Ian stopped talking about their someday house with the big backyard? When had he stopped mentioning retirement plans or discussing what they'd do when they were old? When had their conversations become limited to work and daily logistics instead of dreams and possibilities? You've realized it now, haven't you? Margaret's voice was almost gentle, which made it infinitely more cruel. You've realized that you're not just failing to give him children, you're stealing his future. Every year that passes makes it less likely that he'll ever have the family he wants, even if he does eventually come to his senses and leave you. Ian chose me, Amanda said desperately. He married me knowing that children might not happen. He married you when you were young and hopeful, when pregnancy seemed like an eventual certainty rather than an impossibility. He married you before 8 years of failure proved what you really are. And what am I? Amanda asked, even though she dreaded the answer. Margaret stood up slowly, smoothing down her expensive skirt with practiced elegance. When she spoke, her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather rather than destroying someone's life. You're a woman who has failed at the most fundamental level. You cannot perform the basic function that nature designed. You cannot give your husband children, cannot give his parents grandchildren, cannot give the family the heirs we need to continue our legacy. You are, quite simply, defective. The word defective hit Amanda like a physical blow, and she actually staggered backward. Margaret continued as if she hadn't noticed. But more than that, you're selfish. You know Ian wants children, has always wanted children, and yet you continue to cling to him, continue to deny him the chance to find someone who can actually fulfill his needs. You're destroying him slowly, day by day, and you're too self-centered to see it. Ian loves me, Amanda said, but the words sounded hollow now, unconvincing. Ian thinks he loves you, Margaret corrected, but love built on lies and false hope isn't real love, is it? It's pity, it's obligation, it's a good man trapped by his own decency. Amanda felt her knees give way, and she sank into the chair she had refused earlier. Margaret looked down at her with something that might have been satisfaction. "I'm not telling you this to be cruel, Amanda, though I'm sure it feels that way. I'm telling you this because someone needs to make you see the truth. Someone needs to make you understand what you're doing to my son." "What? What are you asking me to do?" Amanda's voice was barely audible. "I'm asking you to do the right thing, the kind thing, the selfless thing." Margaret moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. "I'm asking you to love Ian enough to let him go, give him a divorce, give him his freedom, give him a chance, to find someone who can actually make him happy, someone who can give him the children he deserves." "I can't," Amanda whispered. "I can't lose him. He's everything to me." "And there's the selfishness I was talking about," Margaret said with disgust. "He's everything to you, but what are you to him, really? A burden, a constant reminder of failure. A woman who takes and gives nothing meaningful in return." Margaret opened the door, then delivered her final blow with surgical precision. "You've had 7 years to prove yourself as a woman, Amanda, and you've failed completely. Every month that you stay with Ian is another month you steal from his future. Every year that passes makes it less likely that he'll ever have the family he wants. If you truly loved him, if you were capable of selfless love rather than this desperate clinging, you would leave. You would do the right thing and set him free." The door closed behind Margaret with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. In the sudden silence, Amanda sat alone in her living room, surrounded by the dinner she had prepared with such hope and love, and felt her world crumble around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. She was still sitting there when Ian came. Home an hour later, his arms full of roses and his face bright with apology for being late. He took one look at Amanda's tear-stained face and dropped everything, rushing to her side. "Amanda, what's wrong? What happened?" But Amanda couldn't speak. She could only collapse against Ian's chest and sob with a despair so profound it seemed to come from her very soul. Ian held her, rocking her gently, whispering words of comfort and love, but Amanda could barely hear him over the echo of Margaret's words in her mind. Defective, selfish, a burden, stealing his future. That night, as Ian slept beside her, Amanda stared at the ceiling and faced the terrible possibility that Margaret might be right. Maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe she really was being selfish by holding on to a man who deserved better than what she could give him. For the first time in their 8-year marriage, Amanda Jane Astley wondered if the most loving thing she could do would be to walk away from the only man she had ever loved, to set him free to find the happiness she couldn't provide. The thought was like a knife in her heart, but she couldn't shake the terrible feeling that it might also be the truth. Chapter 7. Love's Quiet Renaissance. The conversation that changed everything happened 3 days after Margaret's devastating visit, when Amanda finally found the courage to tell Ian what his mother had said. They were sitting in their kitchen, the anniversary dinner still untouched, in the refrigerator, when Amanda quietly recounted every cruel word, every calculated blow to her self-worth. Ian listened in absolute silence, his face growing paler with each revelation, until he looked like a man witnessing the destruction of everything he held sacred. When Amanda finished speaking, when she had shared every venomous word his mother had delivered, Ian was quiet for so long that Amanda began to wonder if he was considering whether Margaret might be right. Finally, Ian stood up and walked to their landline phone. His movements were deliberate, controlled, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Amanda watched, confused, as he dialed a number from memory. "Mother," Ian said, when Margaret answered, his voice so cold it could have frozen fire. "I'm calling to inform you that you are no longer welcome in our lives. You will not contact Amanda again. You will not contact me again. You are dead to us." Ian, what on earth? Margaret's voice was clearly audible through the phone, but Ian cut her off. You came into my home on my wedding anniversary and told my wife she was defective. You told the woman I love more than life itself that she was selfish and broken and stealing my future. You looked at the most beautiful, kind, compassionate person I have ever known and tried to convince her she was worthless. I was trying to help you see. You were trying to destroy my marriage. Ian interrupted, his voice shaking with rage. You were trying to break the woman I love because she doesn't fit your narrow definition of what a wife should be. Well, congratulations, Mother. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Amanda watched in stunned silence as her husband systematically burned bridges with every member of his family. He called his father, his sister, his grandfather, his aunts and uncles and cousins. To each one, he delivered the same message. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and they were no longer part of his life. Ian, you don't have to do this, Amanda whispered when he finally hung up after the last call. They're your family. You can't just cut them all off because of me. Ian turned to her with eyes blazing with conviction. They stopped being my family. The moment they decided you weren't worthy of basic human decency. Family doesn't tear each other down. Family doesn't try to destroy the people we love. Family doesn't make the woman I adore question her own worth. But they're all you've ever known? No, Ian said fiercely, taking Amanda's face in his hands. You are all I've ever needed. You are my family now. You are my everything. And I will not stand by and watch them poison the most precious thing in my life. That night, Ian held Amanda while she cried, not just for the pain she had endured, but for the family ties he had severed to protect her. She felt guilty for being the cause of such a dramatic rupture, but underneath the guilt was something else, relief. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. The months that followed were like a slow awakening from a nightmare. Without the constant pressure and criticism from Ian's family, Amanda began to remember who she was before fertility. Struggles and cruel comments had defined her existence. Ian made a decision that initially worried Amanda. He left the prestigious family practice where he had worked since finishing his residency and took a position at a community health clinic that served underprivileged populations. The salary was lower, but they had savings from his previous job, and more importantly, Ian needed work that fed his soul rather than just their bank account. You'll make half the salary, Amanda protested when he first mentioned the idea. Your career. My career was chosen for me by people who valued prestige over purpose, Ian replied. I want to do work that matters, Amanda. I want to help people who really need it, not just wealthy patients who can afford the best care. I want to be the kind of doctor I dreamed of being before my family's expectations got in the way. The change was transformative for both of them. Ian came home energized by work that fed his soul rather than just his bank account. He told Amanda stories about patients who had no insurance but trusted him with their lives anyway, about children who smiled despite living in poverty, about communities that pulled together to support each other through hardship. You know what I realized today, Ian said one evening as they walked through the park near their apartment. It was spring, and the world was coming alive again after a long winter. I realized that the most important things in life can't be inherited or passed down through bloodlines. Kindness has to be chosen, love has to be earned, compassion has to be practiced. Legacy isn't about DNA, it's about how you touch the lives of people around you. Amanda looked at her husband, looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in years, genuine happiness. The weight of family expectations had been lifted from his shoulders, and he was becoming the man he was always meant to be. They began to heal together, slowly and carefully, like people recovering from a terrible accident. They attended couples and counseling, where they learned to communicate about their grief and disappointment without letting it consume them. They traveled to places they had always wanted to see: Scotland, where Ian's ancestors had originated, and Italy, where Amanda fell in love with the art and architecture and the way people celebrated life despite its hardships. In a small vineyard in Tuscany, as they watched the sunset paint the hills gold and amber, Amanda felt something she hadn't experienced in years: pure, uncomplicated joy. She was laughing at something Ian had said, her head thrown back, her hair catching the evening light, when she caught him staring at her with an expression of such love and wonder that it took her breath away. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. I forgot how beautiful you are when you laugh like that," Ian said softly. "I forgot how much I love the sound of your happiness." "I forgot I could be happy," Amanda admitted. "I forgot that we could be happy." That night, in their small hotel room overlooking the vineyard, they made love with a passion and tenderness they hadn't shared in years. It wasn't about trying to conceive or following ovulation schedules or fulfilling obligations. It was simply about loving each other, celebrating the connection that had survived everything his family had tried to destroy. "I love you," Amanda whispered against Ian's chest afterward, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "I love you so much, it sometimes feels like my heart can't hold it all." "I love you too," Ian replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you exactly as you are, right now, in this moment. I love our life together. I love our future together, whatever it may hold." For the first time in years, Amanda believed him completely. They began to talk about other ways to build a family, if that's what they decided they wanted. They researched adoption, visited foster care agencies, discussed the possibility of being mentors to children who needed positive adult influences in their lives. But gradually, Amanda realized that her desperate need for children had been as much about proving her worth to others as it had been about genuine desire for motherhood. "I think I want to go back to school," Amanda told Ian one morning over coffee. They were sitting in their favorite cafe, the one where they'd had their first official date all those years ago. "I want to become a nurse practitioner, specialize in women's health. I want to help other women who are struggling with fertility issues." "That's a beautiful idea," Ian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You'd be amazing at that. You understand the emotional side of it in a way that most medical professionals don't." "I want to be the person I needed during our worst times," Amanda said. "I want to be someone who listens without judgment, who offers hope without false promises, who helps women remember that their worth isn't tied to their reproductive capacity." Ian squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with pride and love. "You're going to change lives, Amanda. You're going to take your pain and transform it into something that helps others heal." As Amanda embarked on her graduate studies, Ian found his own ways to give back to their community. He started volunteering at a free clinic on weekends, began mentoring young doctors who wanted to work in underserved areas, and eventually became the medical director of a program that brought healthcare to homeless populations. They adopted a rescue dog named Hope, a golden retriever mix, who had been abandoned and traumatized, but who blossomed under their care and love. Watching Hope learn to trust again, seeing her transform from a cowering, fearful creature into a confident, joyful companion felt like a metaphor for their own healing journey. "Look at her," Amanda said one evening as they watched Hope play in their small backyard, chasing butterflies with uninhibited delight. "Look how far she's come. A year ago, she wouldn't even let us touch her. Now she sleeps on our bed and brings us her toys when she wants to play." "Love is transformative," Ian observed, wrapping his arms around Amanda from behind. "When someone feels truly safe and valued, they can become who they were always meant to be." As their third anniversary without Ian's family approached, Amanda found herself reflecting on how much they had both changed. The desperate, broken woman who had sat in bathrooms crying over negative pregnancy tests was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, more sure of her own worth. Ian had transformed too, from a man trying to please everyone into someone who knew his own values and lived by them. They had learned to define family on their own terms. Family was Hope, who greeted them with boundless enthusiasm every day. Family was the community of friends they had built, colleagues from Ian's clinic, classmates from Amanda's program, neighbors who had become like siblings. Family was the patients who trusted them with their health and their stories. Family was the love they chose to give and receive, rather than the obligations imposed by blood and tradition. On a quiet Sunday morning in late fall, as they lay in bed reading together with Hope sprawled across their feet, Amanda felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. She looked around their modest bedroom, at the framed photos of their travels, at the stack of medical journals on Ian's nightstand, at the sunrise streaming through their curtains, and realized that this was enough. This life they had built together, this love they had fought to preserve, this peace they had found in simply being themselves. It was more than enough. It was everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Amanda asked quietly, not looking up from her book. "Do you ever regret choosing me over your family?" Ian set down his own book and turned to face her fully. "Amanda, I didn't choose you over my family. I chose love over hate. I chose kindness over cruelty. I chose the woman who makes me want to be better over people who made us both feel less than. I chose our future over their past. I just sometimes wonder what your life would have been like if you had married someone else. Someone who could have given you children. Someone your family would have approved of." "I know exactly what my life would have been like," Ian said without hesitation. "It would have been empty. It would have been a lie. It would have been everything I was supposed to want instead of everything I actually need." He reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers in the gesture that had become their silent language of love and support. "Amanda, you didn't fail to give me children. You gave me something much more precious. You gave me a love so deep and true that it survived the worst that life could throw at us. You gave me a partner who challenges me to be my best self. You gave me a reason to build a life based on my own values instead of other people's expectations. You gave me you, and that is the greatest gift I have ever received." As the morning sun filled their bedroom with golden light, Amanda finally understood what Ian had been trying to tell her all along. Love wasn't about meeting someone else's definition of perfection. Love wasn't about checking boxes or fulfilling roles or proving worth through productivity. Love was about choosing each other again and again through every storm. Love was about building something beautiful together even when the world tried to tear it down. Love was about becoming the people they were meant to be, not despite their struggles, but because of how they had faced them together. They were complete, just as they were. They were enough. They were home. Chapter 8. Miracle in the Storm. Amanda was 29 years old when the miracle happened, though she didn't recognize it as such at first. She had just completed her nurse practitioner program and was working part-time at Ian's clinic when she fainted during a particularly busy afternoon. One moment she was reviewing a patient's chart, the next she was lying on the examination room floor, with Ian's worried face hovering above her and the taste of copper in her mouth. "I'm fine," she insisted, trying to sit up despite the way the room spun around her. "I just haven't been eating enough. Too much studying, not enough sleeping." But Ian, being both a doctor and a husband who knew her better than she knew herself, wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Amanda had been tired lately, more than the usual exhaustion that came with graduate school. She'd been nauseous in the mornings, attributing it to stress and too much coffee. Her breasts had been tender, but she'd assumed it was hormonal fluctuations, her body's cruel way of reminding her of what she couldn't have. "When was your last period?" Ian asked as he helped her into a chair, his hands gentle but his voice carrying the authority of a physician. Amanda paused, counting backward in her mind, then paused again. She had stopped tracking her cycles obsessively years ago, had made peace with the irregularity that came with stress and approaching middle age. But now, trying to remember, she realized it had been. "I don't know," she whispered, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen. Maybe 6 weeks, 7. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. Amanda stared at the plastic stick in the bathroom of Ian's clinic, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold it steady. After 11 years of trying, after countless negative tests, after giving up hope entirely, there it was, faint but unmistakable. 2 lines. "Ian," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. When he appeared in the doorway, she simply held up the test, unable to form words around the joy and terror that were battling for space in her chest. Ian's face went through a series of emotions so quickly Amanda could barely track them: confusion, realization, disbelief, and finally, overwhelming joy. He crossed the small bathroom in 2 steps and gathered her into his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you sure?" Amanda asked against his chest. "Are we sure? After all this time, how is this possible?" "Sometimes," Ian said, his voice thick with emotion, "miracles happen when you're not looking for them. Sometimes the universe waits until you're ready, until you know your worth isn't tied to whether or not this happens." The pregnancy was classified as high risk due to Amanda's history of infertility and the fact that it was a twin pregnancy. But every appointment brought good news. The babies were healthy, growing normally, with strong heartbeats that sounded like music in Amanda's ears. At 12 weeks, when they saw the first ultrasound image, Ian cried harder than Amanda had ever seen him cry. "There's our baby," he whispered, his finger tracing the tiny form on the screen. "There's our miracle." But the real shock came at the 20-week anatomy scan, when the ultrasound technician grew very quiet and asked them to wait for the doctor. Amanda's heart nearly stopped, convinced that something was wrong, that their miracle was going to be taken away as suddenly as it had been given. "Is everything okay?" Amanda asked when Dr. Chen entered the room, her voice tight with fear. "Everything is more than okay," Dr. Chen said with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Congratulations, you're having twins." The world stopped. Amanda and Ian stared at the screen where 2 babies, 2 perfect little humans, were clearly visible, each in their own amniotic sac, each with their own strong heartbeat. "Twins," Amanda breathed, her hand pressed to her mouth in wonder. 2 babies. 2 miracles, Ian corrected, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "After 11 years of waiting, we're getting 2 babies at once." The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Amanda bloomed in a way that surprised everyone who knew their story. The woman who had once been broken by her inability to conceive became radiant with the joy of carrying life. She talked to her babies constantly, sang to them, read them stories about brave princesses and kind dragons. Ian would come home from work to find her sitting in the rocking chair they'd bought years ago and stored away, her hands on her growing belly, her face peaceful in a way he hadn't seen since their early days of marriage. "They're active tonight," Amanda would say, guiding Ian's hands to where tiny feet were pressing against her skin. "I think they're having a dance party in there." "They're celebrating," Ian would reply, pressing kisses to her belly. "They know how long we waited for them, how much we already love them." They set up the nursery with careful joy, painting the walls a soft green and filling it with cribs and changing tables and all the tiny clothes they had dreamed of using for so many years. Amanda's old collection of hand-knitted baby items finally had a purpose, and she spent hours arranging and rearranging little sweaters and blankets with tears of happiness in her eyes. The pregnancy reached 38 weeks without complication, and Amanda was enormous, beautiful, and thoroughly ready to meet her children. She could barely sleep, could barely walk without waddling, and couldn't see her feet, but she had never been happier in her life. "Any day now," Dr. Chen had said, at her last appointment. "These babies are ready to make their entrance into the world." That entrance came on a Thursday night in October, during the worst storm anyone could remember in decades. Amanda woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of thunder and the unmistakable sensation of her water breaking. For a moment, she lay still in the darkness, listening to the rain lash against their windows and feeling the first gentle contractions begin. "Ian," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Ian, wake up. It's time." Ian was instantly alert, his medical training kicking in even through the fog of sleep. "Contractions? My water broke," Amanda said, and the simple statement sent Ian into focused action. He helped her out of bed, timing her contractions while gathering their hospital bags and calling Dr. Chen's answering service. The storm outside was unlike anything they had seen. Wind howling like a living thing, rain coming down in sheets, so thick it was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Tree branches littered the streets, and power lines sparked in the darkness like fallen stars. "Maybe we should call an ambulance," Amanda suggested, as another contraction gripped her, stronger than the last. "The ambulances are all dealing with storm emergencies," Ian replied, helping her into their car. "The hospital is only 15 minutes away. We can make it." They made it exactly 7 minutes before their car died in a flooded intersection, the engine sputtering and going silent as water reached the door frames. Amanda was in active labor now, contractions coming every 3 minutes, and the hospital was still 8 blocks away. "Ian!" Amanda gasped as another wave of pain washed over her. "I can't. The babies are coming. They're coming now." Ian looked at his wife, the woman he loved more than life itself, and made a decision that would define him for the rest of his life. Without hesitation, he got out of the car into the storm, came around to her side, and lifted her into his arms. "Hold on to me," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Hold on to me and don't let go." What followed was a journey that felt both eternal and instantaneous. Ian carried Amanda through flooded streets, his shoes squelching in water up to his ankles, rain soaking them both to the skin. Amanda clung to his neck, breathing through contractions that were coming faster and harder with each passing minute. "You're doing so well," Ian whispered in her ear as he navigated around a fallen tree. "You're so strong, so brave. Our babies are lucky to have you as their mother." "I can't do this," Amanda sobbed against his shoulder as another contraction peaked. "Ian, I can't. It hurts so much." "Yes, you can," Ian said fiercely, shifting her weight in his arms and continuing forward through the storm. "You've survived everything else. You've survived infertility and cruel words, and people who told you that you weren't enough. You can survive this. We can survive this together." Lightning illuminated their path as Ian carried his wife through the storm, both of them crying now. Amanda from pain and exhaustion, Ian from sheer determination and overwhelming love. With each step, he thought about their journey together, about all the years of disappointment and heartbreak that had led to this moment. He thought about the woman in his arms, who had been broken down and built herself back up, who had loved him through his family's cruelty and his own moments of doubt. "There," Ian gasped as the hospital finally came into view, its emergency entrance glowing like a beacon through the storm. "There it is, sweetheart. We made it." But even as they reached the hospital doors, Amanda knew they weren't going to make it to the delivery room. The pressure was overwhelming now, her body demanding that she push, that she bring these babies into the world, whether the timing was convenient or not. "Ian," she panted as he carried her through the automatic doors. "They're coming. Right now. They're coming now." The emergency room was in chaos. Storm victims filled every bed. Nurses rushed between patients dealing with everything from heart attacks to electrical burns to trauma from falling debris. And in the middle of it all, soaking wet and desperate, Ian Astley carried his wife toward whatever help he could find. "I need help!" he called out to the room at large. "My wife is in labor with twins! She's crowning!" A young nurse rushed toward them, her face pale with exhaustion and stress. "Sir, our maternity ward is without power, and our on-call obstetrician was in a car accident trying to get here. We're completely overwhelmed." "Then I'll deliver them myself," Ian said, his voice cutting through the noise and chaos with absolute authority. "I'm a doctor. Get me a room, get me supplies, and get me some help." As Ian prepared to catch his own children in the midst of a storm, surrounded by chaos and powered by nothing but love and determination, Amanda looked up at her husband's face and saw something that took her breath away. She saw the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago in a medical library, the one who had promised to love her through sickness and health, through triumph and struggle, through all the seasons of their lives together. She saw her hero, her protector, her everything, preparing to bring their miracles into the world with his own hands. And despite the pain, despite the storm, despite the chaos around them, Amanda Jane Astley had never felt safer in her life. Chapter 9. When love delivers its own. The emergency room had been hastily converted into a makeshift delivery room, with Ian working alongside two exhausted nurses to prepare for what was about to happen. The power flickered intermittently, emergency generators struggling to maintain electricity throughout the hospital while the storm raged outside with biblical fury. Amanda lay on a gurney that had been wheeled into the only available space, a supply closet that barely had room for all of them. "Amanda, look at me," Ian said, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. He had washed his hands and put on surgical gloves with the practiced efficiency of someone who had delivered hundreds of babies, though never his own. "Look only at me. Forget everything else, the storm, the noise, the lights. It's just you and me and our babies." Amanda's eyes locked onto his, finding anchor in the love and confidence she saw there. Ian's face was calm, professional, but she could see the emotion burning beneath the surface. Joy, terror, wonder, and overwhelming love, all battling for space in his expression. "The first baby is crowning," announced Sarah, one of the nurses, assisting them. She was young, probably fresh out of nursing school, but her hands were steady and her voice was confident. "Doctor, are you ready?" Ian positioned himself between Amanda's legs, his heart hammering against his ribs as he saw the crown of their first child's head. After 11 years of waiting, after all the heartbreak and disappointment, after all the cruel words and devastating losses, their miracle was finally happening. "Okay, sweetheart," Ian said, his voice thick with emotion but steady with purpose. "With the next contraction, I need you to push. You're so close, Amanda, so close to meeting our baby." Amanda bore down with the next wave of pain, her face contorting. With effort and determination, she had endured years of fertility treatments, months of high-risk pregnancy discomfort, and now she was going to bring her children into the world through sheer force of will. "That's it," Ian encouraged, his eyes never leaving her face even as he worked. "That's perfect, the head is out. One more push and we'll have shoulders." The next contraction brought their first child sliding into Ian's waiting hands, slippery and perfect and absolutely beautiful. For a moment, the entire world went silent. No storm, no chaos, no noise, except the most beautiful sound Ian had ever heard, their baby's first cry. "It's a girl," Ian whispered, his voice breaking as he held their daughter for the first time. She was tiny, but perfect, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to everyone within a mile radius. "Amanda, she's perfect, she's absolutely perfect." Tears streamed down Amanda's face as she watched Ian clean their daughter and wrap her in a blanket before placing her on Amanda's chest. The baby immediately quieted, as if she recognized her mother's heartbeat from the months she had spent listening to it from the inside. "Hello, beautiful," Amanda whispered, her finger tracing the baby's tiny cheek. "Hello, my miracle girl. I'm your mommy, and I've been waiting so long to meet you." Ian had 3 minutes to absorb the wonder of holding his daughter before Amanda's, face contorted with another contraction. "The second baby is coming," Sarah announced, checking the monitors. "Heartbeat is strong, position is good." Ian carefully handed their daughter to Maria, the second nurse who had appeared despite the chaos. Elsewhere in the hospital, then he returned to his position, preparing to catch their second miracle. "This one seems eager to join the party," Ian said, managing a smile despite the intensity of the moment. "I can see the head already." Amanda was exhausted now, her body having already accomplished the impossible once, but she found strength. She didn't know she possessed as another contraction built. This was it. Their family was about to be complete. "Push, Amanda," Ian encouraged. "One more time, sweetheart. Our son is ready to meet us." With a final surge of effort that seemed to come from her very soul, Amanda pushed their second child into the world. Ian caught him as he slipped free. Another perfect baby with strong lungs and an immediate opinion about being born during a thunderstorm. "A boy," Ian said, his voice full of wonder as he held their son. "Amanda, we have a daughter and a son. We have everything." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity, cleaning the babies, checking their vital signs, ensuring Amanda was stable after delivering twins without medical intervention. But through it all, Ian found himself moving with a calm competence that surprised everyone, including himself. This was what he had been meant to do, what all his years of medical training had prepared him for, bringing his own children safely into the world. When both babies were clean and healthy and placed on Amanda's chest, when the immediate medical necessities had been taken care of, Ian finally allowed himself to fully absorb what had just happened. He had delivered his own children. In the middle of a storm, in a hospital supply closet, with minimal help and maximum love, he had caught his son and daughter as they entered the world. "Look what we did," Amanda whispered, gazing down at the two tiny faces pressed against her chest. Their daughter had fallen asleep immediately, exhausted from her dramatic entrance, while their son was still fussing softly, his tiny fists waving in the air. "Look at them, Ian. They're so beautiful." Ian sat on the edge of the gurney, one arm around Amanda and one hand gently stroking their son's back. He had delivered hundreds of babies in his career, had felt joy at each successful birth, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. These weren't just any babies. These were his children, his and Amanda's miracles, the dreams made flesh. After 11 years of hoping, "They're perfect," Ian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're absolutely perfect, just like their mother." "What should we name them?" Amanda asked, looking up at Ian with eyes that sparkled with tears and joy. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking down at their actual children, the names came to Ian as naturally as breathing. "Hope," he said, gently touching their daughter's tiny hand. "Her name is Hope. After everything we went through, all the years of disappointment, she represents hope fulfilled." "Hope," Amanda repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "Hope Astley. It's perfect." "And him?" Amanda asked, adjusting their son in her arms as he continued to fuss. Ian looked at his son, this tiny boy who had come into the world during the storm of the century, who had been born in chaos and caught by his father's own hands, who represented not just their dreams, but their survival as a couple. Gabriel, Ian said without hesitation. Gabriel means God's messenger. He's our message that love wins, that hope is real, that miracles happen when you least expect them. Hope and Gabriel, Amanda said, her voice full of wonder. Our children, our family. As if hearing their names for the first time, both babies settled into peaceful sleep, their tiny bodies relaxing against Amanda's chest. The storm outside was beginning to calm, the thunder growing more distant, but inside their makeshift delivery room, everything was perfect stillness and overwhelming love. Ian, Amanda said softly, looking up at her husband with an expression of such gratitude and love that it took his breath away. Thank you. For what? For carrying me through the storm. For delivering our babies when no one else could. For never giving up on us, on our love, on our dreams. For choosing me over and over again, even when I couldn't see my own worth. Ian leaned down and kissed Amanda's forehead, then pressed gentle kisses to each of their children's heads. Amanda Jane Astley, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you have given me everything I ever wanted, and things I didn't even know I needed. You've made me a husband, a father, a better man than I ever thought I could be. Thank you for teaching me that the best things in life are worth waiting for. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the small window in their supply closet, Ian and Amanda held their twins and marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. The years of struggle, the heartbreak, the cruel words, the family who had tried to tear them apart, all of it had led to this perfect morning when love had literally delivered its own miracles. Do you think they know? Amanda asked softly, watching their babies sleep. Do you think they know how long we waited for them, how much we already love them? I think they know exactly where they belong, Ian replied, his arm tightening around his family. I think they waited to come to us until we were ready to be the parents they needed, parents who understand that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other through every storm. Outside, the hurricane was finally moving away, leaving behind a world washed clean and bright with possibility. And inside a hospital supply closet, Ian and Amanda Astley began the next chapter of their love story, with their children in their arms and their hearts overflowing with the kind of joy that comes only after surviving the darkness together. They had weathered every storm life could send their way. They had been broken down and built back up stronger. They had learned that family isn't about blood or expectations or fulfilling other people's definitions of success. Family was what they held in their arms that morning. Love made manifest, hope given form, and the promise that some things are worth waiting for, no matter how long the wait might be. Hope and Gabriel Astley had entered the world during a storm, caught by their father's loving hands and welcomed by their mother's grateful heart. And as they slept peacefully in their parents' arms, they had no idea that they were the answer to prayers that had been whispered in bathroom floors, the fulfillment of dreams that had been deferred but never abandoned, the proof that sometimes, when you stop trying to force miracles to happen, they arrive exactly when they're supposed to. The storm was over, the waiting was done, their family was complete. Chapter 10. Full Circle. 6 months after Hope and Gabriel entered the world, Amanda Jane Astley stood in front of her bathroom mirror, but this time she wasn't crying over a negative pregnancy test. This time she was looking at herself with wonder, at the woman she had become, at the body that had finally accomplished the impossible, at the face that now radiated the kind of deep contentment that comes from dreams fulfilled. She could hear Ian in the nursery, singing softly to their babies as he changed Gabriel's diaper while Hope watched from her crib. making the gurgling sounds that passed for conversation at 6 months old. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so beautifully ordinary, that Amanda had to pause and absorb the miracle of it all. The phone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the morning peace. Amanda glanced at the caller ID and felt her stomach clench. Margaret Astley. They had been getting calls from Ian's family for months now, ever since word had somehow gotten out about the twins' birth. Each call went unanswered, each voicemail deleted without being heard. But something about this morning felt different. "Ian," Amanda called softly, "your mother is calling." Ian appeared in the doorway, Gabriel in his arms, and a look of weary resignation on his face. "I'll let it go to voicemail like always." "No," Amanda said, surprising them both. "I think we should answer it." Ian studied his wife's face, noting the calm strength there, the way she held herself with quiet confidence. The broken woman who had once collapsed on bathroom floors was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and couldn't be shaken by others' opinions. "Are you sure?" Ian asked. Amanda nodded, reaching for the phone. When she answered, her voice was steady and sure. "Hello, Margaret." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds before Margaret spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amanda! Oh my God, Amanda! You answered!" "Yes, I did." Amanda's voice was calm, neither cold nor warm, simply factual. I don't know what to say. I've been calling for months, hoping, praying that you would give me a chance to—" Margaret's voice broke, and Amanda could hear tears. "Amanda, I need to apologize. I need to tell you how sorry I am for what I said, for what I did to you. I was cruel and wrong, and I've regretted every word for months." Amanda walked to the living room and sat down, Ian settling beside her with Gabriel, while Hope babbled contentedly from her bouncy seat. "What exactly are you sorry for, Margaret? For calling you defective, for telling you that you were failing as a woman, for suggesting that you should leave Ian, for making you feel worthless when you are anything but." Margaret's words came out in a rush, as if she had been rehearsing them for months. "I let my own disappointment and expectations blind me to what was right in front of me. A woman who loved my son completely, who made him happy, who was good and kind and deserving of love and respect." Amanda was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the apology she had never expected to receive. "Do you know what you did to me, Margaret? Do you really understand?" I think I do now. I think I broke something inside you that took years to heal. You almost convinced me that Ian would be better off without me," Amanda said, her voice steady but filled with the memory of that pain. "You made me believe that love wasn't enough, that I was holding him back from happiness. You nearly destroyed my marriage because you couldn't see past your own narrow definition of what makes a woman valuable." "I know," Margaret whispered. "I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Amanda looked at Ian, who was watching her with eyes full of love and admiration. She looked at their children, Hope, who had Ian's dark hair, and her own determined spirit, and Gabriel, who had her fair colouring and Ian's gentle nature. She looked around their modest apartment, filled with the beautiful chaos of new parenthood and the deep contentment of dreams fulfilled. "The thing is, Margaret," Amanda said finally, "you didn't destroy me. You tried to, but you failed. Because the foundation of my worth isn't built on your approval or your family's expectations. It's built on love, Ian's love, my love for him, and now our love for our children. Please," Margaret said, her voice breaking, "please give me a chance to make this right. Let me meet my grandchildren. Let me show you that I can be better, that I can love you the way you deserve to be loved." Amanda stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond their small apartment. Ian followed her, Gabriel still in his arms, and they stood together as a family while Amanda made a decision that would shape their future. "Here's what's going to happen," Amanda said, her voice firm but not unkind. You and Richard and Elizabeth, and every other member of this family who participated in tearing me down are going to come here, to our home, and you're going to apologize, not just to me, but to Ian, for putting him in the position of having to choose between his wife and his family. You're going to acknowledge that what you did was wrong, that it was cruel, and that it will never happen again. Yes, Margaret said immediately. Yes, of course. And then, Amanda continued, you're going to meet Hope and Gabriel. You're going to hold them and love them and marvel at how perfect they are. But you're going to understand that they are not your second chance at controlling this family. They are not validation of your values or proof that your cruelty was justified. They are our children, and we will raise them with the values that matter to us: kindness, acceptance, love, without conditions. I understand. Do you? Amanda's voice sharpened slightly. Because if you ever make either of my children feel like their worth is tied to meeting your expectations, if you ever suggest that love comes with conditions, if you ever treat them or anyone they love the way you treated me, you will never see them again. Do you understand that? I understand, Margaret said, her voice thick with tears. I understand, and I promise. I swear to you, Amanda, on everything I hold sacred, that I will never hurt you or your children the way I hurt you. After Amanda hung up, she and Ian stood in silence for several minutes. Hope had fallen asleep in her bouncy seat, her tiny fist curled against her cheek, while Gabriel dozed contentedly in Ian's arms. I'm proud of you, Ian said finally. The way you handled that, you were strong and clear and absolutely magnificent. I meant every word, Amanda said. They get one chance to prove they've changed, one chance to be part of our children's lives. But if they blow it, they'll never get another one, Ian finished, and I'll support whatever decision you make, completely and without question. Amanda leaned against Ian's side, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute certainty of his love and support. Do you know what I realized while I was talking to her? What? I realized that I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt or broken or diminished by what they did to me. I'm grateful. Ian looked at her with surprise. Grateful? Grateful because their cruelty forced us to build something stronger. It made us choose each other more deliberately, love each other more fiercely. It taught us that family isn't about blood or tradition. It's about people who see your worth and celebrate it, who support your dreams and help you heal when you're broken. Amanda walked over to Hope's bouncy seat and gently lifted their sleeping daughter, cradling her against her chest. They almost convinced me to leave you, she whispered. Can you imagine? We almost missed all of this because I thought I wasn't enough. But you didn't leave, Ian said, shifting Gabriel to one arm so he could put the other around Amanda. You stayed, and you fought, and you healed, and you became even more amazing than you already were. We both did, Amanda corrected. We both became who we were meant to be. That afternoon, Ian's family arrived as a group: Margaret and Richard, Elizabeth, even grandfather Albert in his wheelchair, all of them looking nervous and contrite and utterly out of place in the modest apartment they had once looked down upon. Amanda watched them file in, these people who had tried to destroy her, and felt nothing but calm strength. She was wearing a simple sundress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, completely comfortable in her own skin. Hope was in her arms, wide awake and curious about the strangers, while Gabriel slept peacefully in his car seat. Thank you for seeing us, Margaret said, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you for giving us this chance. Before you meet your grandchildren, Amanda said calmly, I need to hear each of you acknowledge what you did wrong and commit to never doing it again. What followed was a series of apologies, some more sincere than others, but all acknowledging the cruelty that had been inflicted and promising to do better. Elizabeth cried when she apologized for the dinner with Sarah Wellington. admitting that she had been jealous of Amanda and Ian's love and had acted out of her own insecurity. Richard spoke quietly about following his wife's lead when he should have spoken up for what was right. Albert, the proud patriarch who had called Amanda barren, spoke with a shaky voice about the mistakes of old men who confused tradition with wisdom. But it was Margaret's apology that mattered most, because it was Margaret who had delivered the cruelest blow on their anniversary night. "Amanda," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face, "I told you that you were defective, that you were stealing Ian's future, that you were selfish for staying with him. I came to your home on your anniversary and tried to break you completely. I am ashamed of what I did, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." Amanda studied Margaret's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all she saw was genuine remorse and a desperate hope for forgiveness. "I forgive you," Amanda said simply, and the words surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "I forgive all of you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free from the anger and hurt you caused me." Then, and only then, did Amanda allow them to meet Hope and Gabriel. Watching Margaret hold Hope for the first time, seeing the way the older woman's face crumpled with emotion as she looked at her granddaughter, Amanda felt the last piece of her healing fall into place. These people had once made her feel worthless, but now she could see them clearly, flawed humans who had made terrible mistakes, but who were capable of love and growth. "She's beautiful," Margaret whispered, her finger tracing Hope's tiny cheek. "She's absolutely perfect." "Yes, she is," Amanda agreed. "They both are, just like their father said they would be, all those years ago when he promised me that our children would be perfect no matter when they came to us." Ian squeezed Amanda's hand, remembering those dark days when such promises had seemed like impossible dreams. As the afternoon wore on, Amanda watched Ian's family interact with their children and felt a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing people who had dismissed her now marveling at the children she had produced. There was relief in finally having some peace with Ian's biological family. But mostly, there was a deep sense of completion. Not because the family had accepted her, but because she no longer needed their acceptance to know her own worth. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the twins were sleeping peacefully, Ian and Amanda sat on their small balcony looking out at the city lights. "How do you feel?" Ian asked, his arm around Amanda's shoulders. "Complete," Amanda said without hesitation. "Not because your family finally apologized or because we have children now, but because I know who I am. I know that I'm a good wife, a good mother, a good person, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I know that our love is strong enough to survive anything. I know that we built something beautiful together, something that can't be torn down by outside forces." Ian turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face the way he had on their wedding day. "Amanda Jane Astley, you are the strongest, most beautiful, most incredible woman I have ever known. You have given me everything, your love, your forgiveness, your strength, our children, our life together. I'm the luckiest man alive because I get to love you. And I am the luckiest woman alive because you never stopped believing in us," Amanda replied, her eyes shining with tears of joy rather than sorrow. "You carried me through every storm, literally and figuratively. You chose me over everyone and everything else. You loved me when I couldn't love myself." As they sat together in the peaceful evening air, Amanda thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The medical library where they had first met, when Ian had told her that the heart wasn't meant to be understood, but felt. The years of fertility struggles that had nearly broken her, the cruel words and devastating moments that had tested their love. The night of the storm when Ian had carried her through flooded streets to bring their children into the world. Every moment of pain had led to this perfect peace. Every tear had watered the ground where their happiness now grew. Every test of their love had only proven that some bonds are unbreakable. "Do you know what I want to tell Hope and Gabriel when they're old enough to understand?" Amanda asked. "What?" "I want to tell them that they were worth waiting for, that every year we waited, every disappointment we faced, every cruel word we endured, all of it was worth it because it brought us to them. I want them to know that the best things in life don't come easy, but they do come to those who don't. Give up on love." Ian kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of the promise of all the years stretching ahead of them. "They'll know," he said against her lips. "They'll know, because they'll see it every day in the way we love each other, in the way we love them, in the family we've built together." Inside their apartment, Hope and Gabriel slept peacefully in their cribs, dreaming whatever dreams 6-month-old babies dream. They had no idea that they were the answer to prayers whispered in desperation, the fulfillment of dreams deferred but never abandoned, the proof that love really can conquer all. But they would know, because their parents would. Tell them every day in words and actions, "You are loved, you are wanted, you are enough. You are perfect exactly as you are." And in telling their children these truths, Ian and Amanda would continue to heal the wounds that had once nearly destroyed them. They would continue to choose love over fear, hope over despair, each other over everyone and everything else. Their love story had begun in a medical library with a broken woman and a man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. It had survived infertility and family cruelty and years of heartbreak. It had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. And now, as they sat together in the quiet evening air, with their children sleeping safely inside, Ian and Amanda Astley knew with absolute certainty that their love would survive anything else life might bring their way. Because the best love stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with happily ever after, no matter what. And theirs was the very best kind of love story there was.